AJ Preller has spoken, and we will discuss the main talking points from his end of 2024 address, laying out the plans and the outlook for the offseason heading into 2025. And we got a pretty talkative version of AJ Preller this morning, didn't we? It was about 45 minutes or so we spent on the Zoom with us. Oh, what is happening here? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself on YouTube. Okay. Anyways, Derek.
Hey, there we go. Turn the reverb down there.
Yeah, my bad.
But yeah, you're T-Pain yourself with the auto tune.
Nobody wants that. Anyways, Preller seemed happy to hang out with everybody this morning, which is good.
He did. He was even offering extra information beyond what the question required. So he was. I think he's really buoyed by what happened this year, and it was nice to see him in a good mood. Obviously, he's executive of the year, right? I mean, they'll probably give it to Friedman because of what the Dodgers are doing right now, but still, I mean, it's you cannot. It's a no-brainer to go sign Shohei Ohtani. Plus, you have $700 million bucks to do it. What AJ did this year to subtract nearly $100 million bucks and get better and exponentially better, and then sign on for have a better team for the next year or two. I mean, it's just a no-brainer here.
Yeah, a lot of really savvy moves, and so and quite a different tone from when he was having to field these questions and have these conversations a year ago, which I'm sure made it a little bit easier for him to enter into that conversation. And so we'll get to the main talking points. You cut a handful of sound bites from AJ, things that caught your attention during today's lengthy address, and so we'll discuss just kind of the different topics that presented itself today that were areas of curiosity from the local reporter tribe. Thanks to OG's sponsor of the On Friar podcast. Appreciate all they do for On Friar and for the NBC7 sports team. If you need a place to watch the World Series, go to OG's. Tons of TVs, a bunch of locations around San Diego County. Football, college football Saturdays, NFL Sundays. Monday Night Football got a doubleheader this Monday night as well, as we record Monday afternoon instead of our usual Thursday afternoon time slot. Got the
Chargers. NBA streaming exclusively on ESPN Plus in Arizona against the Cardinals tonight. Just like us, Peacock, we get our own exclusive, just Peacock streaming playoff games. They're trying to ride our coattails over there at the other network.
I don't know how I feel about the Monday night doubleheader. I kind of like just the one game that's kind of got the spotlight, but that's just me.
Well, I like having options because how many of these primetime games lately have been just crap? So if one of them turns into just crap, you get to watch the other one. Now, granted, Baltimore, Tampa Bay tonight, probably going to be a pretty exciting up and down game. And the Cardinals and Chargers would be the crap game. But, you have an option to watch one if the other one is terrible.
They should at least both be competitive. I think the line for Baltimore was like 4.5 and the Chargers were like a 1.5 road favorite. So as long as we get close competitive ball games, that's always something to look forward to. So again, if you need a place to catch a game, have a good meal, great beer list, OG's is the spot for you. Without further ado, the walk-up music. It is the On Friar podcast. He is Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp. Pleased to be with you on a Monday afternoon. Things have been pretty quiet since the offseason wheels started turning, and waiting for a chance to hear from AJ Preller, potentially Mike Shildt. And we got Preller today via Zoom with the newspaper and the scorecard from Dylan Cease's no-hitter behind him, a picture with Peter Seidler as well. And nice to get some time with AJ Preller and explore a bevy of topics, faced a number of questions, and as we mentioned off the top, had a lot to say. He is pretty adept, as everybody in his position is, at saying a lot without saying too much. And, one thing that continued to come up was we'll start to have these discussions in the weeks ahead. And so that's just kind of the nature of things. It's a long off season. And so maybe there will be more to glean once the GM meetings come around November and then the winter meetings, but nice to hear from him. And Derek, I'll let you lead things off. What was the topic or the answer or the line that jumped out to you from his address this morning?
Two things. One, he kept on going out of his way to say how amazing this season was from a fan base perspective, and just the energy at Petco Park, everything that we've talked about here, and how the Padres fan base and the whole San Diego community jumped on board with this club. Like, they felt it. And he said multiple times how much they felt it. In fact, let's go ahead and play just a little bit of AJ talking about that, because it was it really struck me when he was just going, man, there were so many guys who were so happy to be on this club and the atmosphere that's been set up here at Petco Park.
And 3 times in 5 years we played in the postseason. That's a compliment to a lot of the guys that have been here, and then some of the new guys that came in, how quickly they blended together. It was a lot of fun to watch that and see that and be a part of that. And honestly, doing it for the best fan base in the country. It's pretty obvious right now. Something's very special going on in San Diego. The fans love this team, love this ballpark, and the city is just so excited. And I think for us, that's where it stings the most. We do this job. I think from day one, I've spoke about being on that big stage. That big stage is the World Series. We're not going to be content till we get there as an organization. But we've got a lot of people very motivated to build on this year, and seeing the excitement and the support the fans give us every single day. At heart, I'm a huge baseball fan, and I think just feeling that throughout the city over the last 8 months, 9 months, their love for this team, this organization, their appreciation. We're going to do everything we can to go get better now over the next 6 or 8 months, and be back in a spot where we're playing in October, and won't be satisfied until we're playing on that big stage in the World Series.
That was pretty cool. I mean, just say it was a great fun year, and then just the best fan base in Major League Baseball. And it's with the way that the Friar faithful showed up this year, it's really hard to argue against that sentiment.
No question about it. I believe, was that part of his opening address? I think.
Yeah, without even being asked. That was part of the right off the bat. Just, I'm going to make my opening statements, and oh, by the way, y'all are awesome.
Yeah, and rightly so, and they were, and his team felt that and clearly fed off of that. And to his credit, he also put together a team that was really good, was really fun to watch, and super easy to root for because of how cohesive they were and how much guys just kind of pulled for one another. And we heard it from the team. I mean, Jason Adam had the great line during the playoffs just about like a team that's really like sold out for one another and sold out on winning. And the resilience we saw this year is not something we saw last year. The togetherness we saw this year, not necessarily something we saw last year. And all those things make a team easier to root for and capture the interest and the passion of a fan base. And they did all that. And good for him, giving a tip of the cap to the fan base. But he is also kind of responsible for that, just in the way he put together this team with more limited funds and resources, that was able to check all those boxes and be a really compelling watch, pretty much all season, but certainly from like mid-June on.
Yeah, it was an amazing thing to see. It really was. And let's kind of knock these down as we come to them. But the guy who really did help with that is Mike Shildt, the manager, who signed only a 2-year contract. Obviously, he would be a lame duck going into next year. AJ did say that they are going to be talking about an extension with Mike Shildt, and they are going to be talking about the possibility of bringing back the entire coaching staff, specifically Ruben Niebla, the pitching coach, who also had his contract come up this year. Now, coaching staffs in Major League Baseball typically are on a year-to-year basis. The manager gets a longer-term deal. It's rare that assistant coaches or guys on the bench get multi-year deals. They just kind of do it year by year as they go. Gives them more mobility, which is something that's nice to have in case they want to go, be a manager somewhere else. Niebla was also a guy who they talked about as, yes, unless he wants to go be a manager somewhere, he loves it here. His family's here. He's a San Diego guy. They're going to do everything they can to hold on to him as well. So the coaching staff looks like it's going to be back as close to intact as we can possibly find. And with the job they did with this team, especially with how many young players came along, and the Jackson Merrills and Matt Waldrons and Randy Vasquez's of the world, you cannot argue with the results.
No, not at all. And kind of a no-brainer from Shilt's standpoint. And even going back to like when he was signed, Jay Singler had signed a 3-year, Bob Melvin had signed a 3-year. and Mike Shildt gets a 2-year. And, not hard to read kind of between the lines there with some of the uncertainty about AJ Preller's future, the struggle to find kind of a good fit there at manager. They obviously didn't want to tether themselves to anybody for too long. But once you get through this season and do what they did, it's kind of like a no-brainer. Okay, extend that, whether it's a couple years, few years. I don't know. Like, do you have an idea of like what would do you give them a fresh 3-year? Do you tack 2 years onto this year? Do you go 2 years out? Because we have seen things go south after year 2. So like there's that part of it you kind of have to consider as well.
Yeah, I think the industry standard is add 2 to 3 years on top of it. So if he had 2 years to this, he's on a 3-year deal.
Yeah.
That's probably where they're going to go with this. And that's how most managers do it. Very, very rarely is even in Major League Baseball, do we find the John Gruden 10-year contracts being thrown around anywhere. Even I'm not sure even Bobby Cox or, Joe Torre ever signed something of that length. So it's more or less procedural with most managers. If it's working, what Brian Snitker's deal is never more than 3, 4, 5 years. And he's done amazing things in Atlanta, is probably never going anywhere. So that's kind of the way you do it. So give him a 2-year extension that puts him on board through 2027, and you keep working off of that from there.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. And again, it was just from everything that we've seen, a really, really good fit. We're less privy to like how are AJ and Shildt kind of working off one another and communicating. There was a fair share of talk about that, I think, during the offseason and into the spring. But what you saw during the season was a team that really appreciated Shilt's approach. He brought just kind of like an energy, an outlook on the game, like a competitive spirit that really served the team well and played into some of their success. And I think you make another good point. Just when you have some of these young guys that have come up that have, I think one of like, when I think about the struggles to find a manager, I often find myself thinking about Fernando Tatis Jr. And like, it's a shame that Tatis just hasn't had his guy. And you don't want that to now be the case with Jackson Merrill, when Shildt has obviously had a strong bond with Jackson. There seems to be a trust there and appreciation for one another, certainly from a player standpoint, or from Shilt's standpoint to the player, and just the way that Jackson seems to kind of embody like the competitive approach, like the flip the page. What's the next thing we got to check off the list? Just kind of that workman-like spirit. And so it'd be great with Jackson now kind of appearing to be like the next star face of the franchise. It'd be really nice to avoid the situation where Tatis is in, where every 2 years he's had to kind of get acclimated to a new guy and kind of get a feel for him and that clubhouse fit. Shilt's done everything that you need him to do. And, I even saw some, I think, Twitter chatter, like, what have the Cardinals done since Mike Shildt left? And, he got them to the playoffs, every single year, won manager of the year. And for whatever reason, things went the way that they did. And the Cardinals haven't been all that great ever since 2021. And, it just seems to be a really good fit here in the clubhouse with the fan base, and makes total sense to just re-up it for a couple years and hope that things continue to roll on.
Yeah, well, Mike Shildt is a pretty damn good manager. I think we probably figured that one out this year, right? He is. I'm looking it up to make sure I have this right. But his first 3 full seasons as a manager, more than 90 wins. I know that's only been done like once or twice before, and I can't remember off the top of my head who the other guys to do it were. But he is the first guy to do it with 2 different organizations. That's wild. The guy, wherever he goes, he understands it and he gets it. And what's really awesome about him is he came up through the minor league system. Like, he spent more time as a minor league instructor or manager than he has in the major leagues in his baseball coaching career, exponentially more time. So he loves the developmental aspect of baseball players. So he knew about Jackson Merrill. He went and had a relationship with him. I remember talking to him, just standing in the dugout in the middle of the year about what's going on with Ethan Salas. He knew exactly what Salas was doing. He understands what's going on in the minor leagues. And you compare that to, again, we'll go back to Bob Melvin, who didn't particularly care what was going on. He was focused on, what do I have here? What are my guys doing? If I have to make a spot start, who's my one guy? He didn't want to know what was down there in the rest of the system. It didn't interest him because it didn't help him on his day-to-day basis. Mike Shildt wants to have a granular understanding of what's coming in 3 years, what's coming in 5 years, what's the draft class look like, because he wants to start building that relationship with these guys when they're in the minor leagues. So it's a really cool thing to see a guy who has that kind of background still applying that, even though he's now a very successful major league manager.
Yeah, because I mean his background really is just like akin to a player that grinded his way through every level of the minors to finally become a big leaguer as like a 28-year-old. I mean, that's
He's
kind
Mason
of
McCoy, right?
yeah, that's kind of like Mike Shilt's story, you know, in an age where you're seeing, and really across sports, like young former players step into that position before they really kind of go through the process. And Shildt obviously doesn't have kind of the decorated playing background, but like he really went through the process, and I think has that appreciation and the understanding. And I think just the knowledge of like what that does for a player and what those types of players contribute to a clubhouse. And I think, you know, again, Jackson's youth. Now, Jackson didn't grind his way through. He had an accelerated path, but just the youthful energy and that sort of thing of a guy that comes up and is able to have an impact on an organization. And I mean, you talked about AJ with executive of the year. I would think Shildt maybe has an even stronger argument for manager of the year, because like the executive gets those guys, the manager has to work with those guys, and Dave Roberts got to work with Ohtani. He got to work with Yamamoto, Betts, Freeman down the list. Padres were in a position where you saw the payroll go like this, you saw the star power kind of go like this, and what did the team do? Like drastically overperformed where they were a year ago.
Oh, constantly, drastically overperform. I mean, you just look at the National League. I mean, you got to figure that AJ Hinch has got it locked up in the American League, right? But if you look at the National League, it's like, okay, we knew the Phillies would be there, we knew the Dodgers would be there, we knew the Braves would be there. I mean, maybe Mendoza with the Mets.
Yeah,
is really the only other guy who you can have even put in the conversation with Mike Shildt this year. Pat Murphy knew what he had in going to Milwaukee, and the Padres had the same record that he did, by the way, playing in a much more difficult division than the Central. So
yeah,
I don't see how it's, unless guys go, oh yeah, well, they make the same argument with it. You got Ohtani, you got Machado, and you got Tatis, and you got Dylan Cease, and you got Luis Arraez. You got all these really good players. But they had their best years under Mike Shildt. So
yeah.
There's certainly something to be said for that. I mean, again, since it's New York and that market, and given the fact they were an even bigger disaster last year than the Padres were, and they got back to the playoffs, I could see that being probably the other guy. But again, in my book, I mean, it's Mike Shildt, and then there's everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, 100%. Lauren chime in. Good to see you guys again. If you really want to lose your mind, could Dave Roberts win the award if the Dodgers win the World Series?
That has no bearing on it because it's a regular season award and the voting's in.
So there you go. So it should absolutely be Mike Shildt. And I think, yeah, both he and AJ have strong cases for each. And I think Shilt's might be even stronger than AJ's. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how that kind of plays out, what that looks like. AJ did mention it's some discussions that they've started with Eric Xander, Eric Grupner, and he mentioned in the coming weeks or in the next couple of weeks, you know, they hope to line up on something with Mike Shildt. And he also said something to the effect of like, you know, we're not too worried about Shildt. Like he's going to show up, he's going to do his job kind of regardless of what the circumstances are from that standpoint. I'm sure Shildt would love to have kind of the security there. And as AJ said, like they want to reward those guys for performing, and that's what Shildt did. And so that's what they should do. And you mentioned Ruben Niebla. That's kind of like the next big question is, or maybe even the bigger question. What does that look like for Ruben? What are his ambitions? That part we don't really know. The fit is obviously there. Hometown aspect of it is obviously there, and the appreciation for what he's done for the pitching staff. But that's one that we'll need to monitor. And you got to be curious if teams see what he's done and say, hey, how would that guy look at the top stair of the dugout?
Since you mentioned Eric Xander and Eric Grupner, shall we talk about payroll? Because
Sure.
AJ was also asked about what's your payroll looking like. Remember, they did reset the competitive balance tax this year, which is huge. Because now if they do want to go over again next year, it's not going to be anywhere near as punitive with the penalties. The question is, and I know a lot of people have kind of had this because we don't really get to see or talk to Eric Xander all that often. What is the payroll going to look like? You know, with Peter Seidler being gone, will they be throwing out these massive payrolls again like they did 22 and 23? AJ did talk about that and actually kind of made it sound like, you know what, we're going to do it what we need to do to be able to win championships.
Just kind of like knowing the landscape. Here's the different possibilities. Here's what's going to be out there. Obviously, being open-minded to what different paths, take us to from a payroll standpoint. The only thing, like I've seen repeatedly, when I've been here, and I think we've demonstrated is we want to win. We're here to win a championship. I think we're going to do it responsibly, but we're looking to win championships. We're looking to put, to get in the playoffs. And when you do that, if we need to have certain resources, we'll have those conversations. But that's really what the next couple of months are for. And it's not like, hey, you have to be at this price point to do X, Y, or Z. It's kind of like there's a lot of different ways to do that. We've done it a lot of different ways over the last 5 years or so. And I think that's what we're going to get to over the next couple weeks and months, depending on what players are out there and what we need to do.
Interesting. That kind of gives me a little bit of hope of like, what, if that impact guy is out there and you're one player away, you think, from winning a World Series, I think they'll have the ability to go out and do that. What'd you take out of that?
Yeah, I think, and they've always AJ's always talked about it in that manner. Like, it's getting the right guys. It's spending money on the right guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could look at certain contracts where it maybe doesn't necessarily fit with that stance or that directive. Yes. And so, but I think from a character standpoint, from a fit standpoint, he has that. The performance just obviously hasn't been there. So yeah, I think, that is in kind of the Preller Seidler mold. Like, we're not going to spend for the sake of spending, but if we think this is an impact guy that's going to help us take that step, we will invest. I think, there's a lot of industries these days, ours included, where if you prove you can do more with less, the expectation will then be that you do more with less
all the time.
And so part of me is curious, or maybe even worries that, like, did AJ hurt his case for handing out another big contract, landing another big star player, because look what came up through the system. Look at the savvy moves with veteran guys. Look at the early season trades that were able to land star type players for less of a less prospect capital, because he pulled so many buttons effectively and did so by, what was their drop off in terms of payroll this year? Then I kind of wonder if the Kitsendas and Grupners are looking at him like, okay, that's great, but like, we did pretty darn well. Like, if we didn't run into the Dodgers when we did, that really is an NLCS matchup. We could essentially say
90.
We're essentially, don't necessarily cut, but stay under that umbrella because you've proven that you can do that effectively.
Which is possible. As we talked about last episode, they're going to have right around 19-20 million bucks under the cap after all of their arbitration players are taken care of. So you're looking at, you can probably get Profar and Higashioka in under that. And you're going to need to find a couple of bench pieces. And I love the guys like the David Peraltas and the Donovan Solanos of the world. They might not be able to be here. We've already written Tanner Scott off. And I think rightfully so, because he's going to go get big money to be a closer somewhere, which he deserves beyond the shadow of a doubt. And I do not begrudge him going that at all, unless he goes to the Dodgers, and screw that guy. It's going to be interesting to see how close they do get. If they bring Ha-Seong Kim back, if he gave him 10 million, well, there's half of it going to Ha-Seong Kim right there. So we just don't know what it's going to look like, but they're going to be flirting and really close with that. Again, unless they send another decent contract out of town somehow with a trade, which we'll have the whole offseason to talk about, do you deal Jake Cronenworth's contract, yada, yada, yada. Well, we've got all that time to talk about what that might look like, but they're going to be very close to that. So we'll see how far they want to go up, over, under. Does Luis Arraez get an extension that actually drops your CBT, number for him, or Michael King? They're all kinds of iterations we might see here.
Yeah. And I think, look, like, you can dip your feet beyond the tax for a year. Part of it is how far do you blow past that number? How often do you blow past that number? So it's not like a black and white thing. Like, there are gradients to this. And so they might be willing to exceed the threshold and say, okay, this is going to be kind of a 1-year thing. Maybe the numbers tell us that there's some contracts that are coming off the books potentially an Eric Hosmer, that allow us to then kind of scale back without necessarily having to make cuts or make trades, just based on how contracts age out or players go into free agency or what have you. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they said, hey, the pieces are right, an opportunity is right to add a player. We're gonna push through it. What I wouldn't expect is for them to blow by it by $50 million and to do that for 3 consecutive years when the penalties get harsher and harsher.
Well, let's listen to AJ Preller talk about free agents and the ones that they have right now and what they might be doing with those guys in the next month or so.
Start until the GM meetings. So, ultimately we'll keep talking, and, it really doesn't start until the GM meetings. So, ultimately we'll keep talking and get a little bit more active with our conversations between now and I think that's November 4th. Yeah, I think, the next couple of weeks we'll be prepared, to get more detail on those spots. I think the good news, a lot of those guys have indicated that they really enjoy being here. They enjoy, playing here in front of our fan base. They love the organization. They love their teammates. I think everybody kind of feels like I had I don't know, 5 or 6 different conversations where to a person, they were saying, hey, this is the best team I've played on. And some guys that have played on 100-win teams, playoff teams, and they were like, this is the best team. And this is, from an organization standpoint, the best feeling they've had, of just being, honestly, to get, being together and enjoying it, enjoying baseball. So, where does that leave us? What does that mean? Again, hopefully, players, they talk and, they're interested in coming back and being a part of it. And we'll tackle all that here in the next couple of weeks and months.
In the bowels of Dodger Stadium after that Game 5 loss to the NLDS, Jurickson Profar and Kyle Higashioka told me basically that exact same thing. This is the most fun year we've had playing baseball. This is the best group of guys we've been around. We want to be back here. We're going to have to see what the business aspect of this, what happens there, but we want to be here and want to be around this team. So let me ask you this, Darnay, do you think that maybe leads to the quote unquote hometown discount for some of these guys because they do love being here and want to be around this group so much? And if so, how much of a discount are we talking about?
That's a great question. And I can't think of too many instances where we've actually seen that discount play out. I might be missing an obvious one, but just in my 6 years or so covering the team, because it didn't happen.
Have to go back to Tony, honestly.
Well, and it didn't happen with Jurickson Profar, a couple of years ago, and he's back in the situation again, and he's the one where I guess all those guys, Luis Arraez, seem to really appreciate it here. He's had success in a number of different places. But Profar's, I think, the most obvious one that comes to mind, just given his situation. He has this incredible season. You're still not sure, what can you really count on from this season to next? What does the money look like? How much he wants to get paid? Would he accept the contract that he turned down or, essentially turned down a couple years ago, in kind of that $7.5–8 million range? So that's, and what did he learn from that process, from trying to get more money, ending up in Colorado, him playing poorly for a bad team, and then, getting the umbrella back here to San Diego, or the parachute back here to San Diego in September of 2023. And then, the last year playing out the way that it did. So that part, I don't know. I just feel like you don't see it happen all that often. And we all want that to be the case. But it's hard once money starts getting thrown around, offers start getting thrown around, to really know, if a guy's going to accept that, especially when they're at a stage in their career when they don't know how many of these kind of lucrative deals they're going to have in front of them.
Well, Jordan, he needs to finish his career as a Padre, right? He's going into his age 32 season. That means this is his last time, unless he signs another 1-year deal. Yeah. 1 year at 12, see if it was real or not, which I honestly do not in any way see him doing. I think this is going to be the one where he's like, this is my last one. But he's also, I think, been through so much in his professional career, and he's been places where it didn't work. He's been places he didn't like. He's been places he wasn't utilized. He's been places where he had to play in the Coliseum in Oakland. I think he wants to be in a spot where he's comfortable. He's financially very well taken care of already. Spotrac has him at 3 years and $38 million as a projection. That's almost $13 million a year. I think that's right in the ballpark for what he should get and what the Padres probably could give him. 3 years and 36, 4 years and 48, somewhere right around there. 12 million seems to be a pretty good benchmark for a guy who played as well as he did and means as much as he does to this clubhouse and this fan base. I think that's probably right on the money. And if that's the case for a 31-year-old going, again, age 32 season, all-star who produced the way that he did, that is the hometown discount, right?
That number, we discussed this a little bit last week. That number makes me a little bit nervous. Because you can't help but wonder, was 2024, is that going to be the outlier for a guy that in his Padres career, 113 OPS plus, 753 OPS, when the number jumps as drastically as it did, and then does tail off last couple months of the season, and playoffs didn't really do much for you. I love Jurickson. I love the fit for this team, but beyond kind of like, I like 330. I like that range a little bit more.
Well, then would he go maybe 5 and 50? It's the Adam Jones deal. 5 means it gets him through. He's 37. He's only making 10 million a year. He only counts 10 million against the cap. So it's less average annual value, but his last really longer term guaranteed money. Because I think that's what I think be perfect for both sides as well.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, I'm curious what the market tells him he's worth. It's one of those situations where Kyle, do you give him some deferred money? Do you make it a 15-year deal for Jurickson? Pay him for 15 years and it's like a couple $1 million here or there.
Yeah, that's a great call. That's a great call. I don't know if he'd do it. I'm not sure if that's the guy you want to do that for. That's, I think, for the Otanis and Sotos of the, Judges of the world. But if he'll do it, why the hell not? Give him the Bobby Bonilla contract, pay him $1 million a year until 2086.
But I would guess that the Padres and the general baseball market probably view Dylan Cease and a Dylan Cease extension pretty similarly. Same for Michael King, maybe varying degrees to Luis Arraez because he is such a unique player. But I don't know if that's the case. Does the baseball world value and view Jurickson Profar, broadly speaking, the same way that we do here in San Diego and the Padres do? And like we saw with the Bogaerts contract, I don't know, that number that AJ came up with that Bogaerts got, I don't know who he was negotiating against that it led to that number, because it seems so drastically higher than what anybody else is offering him. I don't want to end up in a situation where you're paying Jurickson Profar $3, $4, $5 million more than anybody else would have paid him.
Well, the thing about Xander Bogaerts is we don't know what the other offers were. There were just scuttlebutt, yada yada, and he's not that bad against the CBT, right? It's okay, it's acceptable. And AJ, even on the call today, did say he expects Xander to come back to being like an all-star caliber, have what he called a Xander Bogaerts year next year, which. Yeah, exactly. Cross your fingers, pray to whatever deity you choose to pray to. That would be fantastic. There's, I think, a perception around Major League Baseball as well, as I get comfortable here, that Jurickson Profar of 2024 only exists in a Padres uniform. He's been with the Rockies. He went to the Rockies. He went to Coors Field and got worse, and then goes back to Petco Park and gets better. He was okay in Oakland. He was okay in Texas. He's this version of him you only get if he's playing 81 games at Petco Park every year. So I think that's the perception around Major League Baseball is, well, yeah, if that's just the player, we'd love to take that, but he's not shown him to be that player in any other setting. So I think there will be a lot of, we'd love to have him, but we don't have any guarantees that we're going to get that version of that guy. So we'll do a 1 year 15 to see if he can do the same thing for us. And then we'll talk again. So again, that takes us back to the average annual value versus how much guaranteed money do you want throughout the life of the contract thing? My heart tells me he's not going anywhere, and it'll be a nice lucrative deal for him that certainly fits in the Padres budget and doesn't hamstring them from keeping or signing other players that they need to keep or sign to keep this train rolling the way we've seen it. It just, everybody understands at this point. It makes too much sense. And I very much doubt that Major League Baseball, some other team is going to come in here and go, I'll give you 3 years and 60. I just don't see that.
Yeah. You asked AJ, like, do you have a pecking order for these guys? And I'm sure he does.
Yeah, that's one of those I know he's not going to answer it, but you have to ask the question so it's on the record things. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was curious, like, how would you place the pecking order of, the guys that could be due for extensions?
Talking about free agents guys who are up for extensions?
So of the Cease, King, Arraez guys going into their final year of team control, big questions that are looming this offseason into next. How do you view kind of that crop of players? Apart from the Profar, apart from Ha-Seong Kim, just in terms of those guys, talking like all-star level players, Cy Young level pitchers, like how you would approach that situation. Like, can you get deals lined up for all of them? Is there somebody that's going to go into the season and have to kind of stare down free agency and have that uncertainty? How do you see all that?
Well, number one, obviously, Tyler Way is at the top of the list. Without blink. No. All right, let me read you off the arbitration eligible players right now. Luis Arraez, Dylan Cease, Michael King, Jason Adam, Adrian Morejon, Luis Campusano, Tyler Wade, Luis Patino. And I think if I was going to put a pecking order on those guys, it'd probably be, I'm talking about like 1 and 1A here, but Michael King and Luis Arraez. Dylan Cease would be right after that. Jason Adam. And then it's throw everybody into a hat after that. Really, just pick. Morejon he's either amazing or he's throwing batting practice. Campusano, we don't know if he can put together an entire season or not. He's had a couple chances, hasn't shown the ability to do it. Patino is an interesting piece. Maybe you can stretch him out, turn him into one of those guys like this year's version or next year's version of Randy Vasquez from this year. And Tyler Wade, he's a tremendous bench guy. I love having that dude out there. He can come into any situation late in the game, and you're not going to have any problems with the balls hit right to him. He's shown that time and again. I'll take that dude on my bench any day of the week. But Cease is probably not going to re-sign here. He's going to be getting one of those 9-figure contracts because his stuff is just absolutely off the charts. Arraez and King, I think they both love being here so much. You can probably do something with those two guys. So they would be the two that I would look at the most as, sustainable. Plus, Cease is such a hard thrower. You always have the thought in the back of your head with maybe an injury. Michael King, I know he has the funky delivery, but I don't see him as a guy that puts a whole lot of strain on the arm. I think he's going to have a longer, healthier career and still be really, really damn good in the process. And Luis Arraez basically won a batting title with one hand this year. He tore a thumb ligament in June and hit pi. That's unheard of. And that dude's going to hit 340, 350 when he's healthy. So that's a guy who, put that catalyst at the top of the lineup, especially one that's going to have Tatis and Machado and Bogaerts in it for the next decade. That just makes too much sense not to have that guy setting the table.
Does it alter your outlook at all knowing that Dylan Cease has shaved his mustache?
No. Why would it?
I don't know. I just noticed that, and I thought that was interesting.
What's he look like without a mustache, by the way? Does he look like he's in high school?
He kind of looks like you, Derek.
He's a good-looking man, then. Yeah.
Good-looking gentleman.
Yeah.
It just feels like there's something missing. I think with the Michael King situation, too, with him being the centerpiece of the Juan Soto trade, it behooves you even more to make sure that guy's with your franchise long-term, right? Because if you have to trade Juan Soto and have to sell your fan base as we did well with that trade, which they've done, a year into it, even knowing what Juan Soto's done for the Yankees and all that, I think people feel generally pretty good about what we've seen from the return so far. You feel much better, especially when there is we'll see what happens with Juan. So there's no guarantee he stays with the Yankees. Seems to be a good fit. But if you can lock down Michael King, then you're like, okay, we didn't just get a couple good years out of the guy. We got, kind of a sneaky Cy Young caliber season his first year, locked him down. He's now going to be a pillar of the rotation, a rotation that's got some, injured, aging arms. Blake Snell's not around anymore. We're seeing, maybe a bit of a kind of transition now with this rotation, and having Michael King be one of those guys, if not the guy at the head of that going forward, as you're forming a narrative and selling your fan base, like that helps. And obviously you traded for Dylan Cease, but what you gave up wasn't Juan Soto, wasn't nearly as drastic. You'd love to keep him around. But I think it's helpful if you do that with Michael King, given that he was the centerpiece of the Juan Soto trade, and that will always be the case.
Yeah, plus he's such a good dude. He and his wife they're lovely people. I mean that with complete sincerity. What they've already, really just ingratiated themselves and inserted themselves into the San Diego community. What they're doing with diabetes research he's awesome. He truly is an awesome human being. So to keep him around for the long term, I think he's a great guy to have at the top of that rotation for the next 6, 7, 8 years, which I think he can probably go that long with given the fact he's not one of those hard throwing guys. He relies on movement, and when that movement is working, man, that sinker slider sweeper combo is, as the Atlanta Braves will tell you, when it's working, it is awfully damn hard to hit. You want to hear AJ talking about the pitching rotation, specifically with the fact that Joe Musgrove is not going to be there next year?
Let's do it.
Here we go.
It's been great here of giving us, hey, this is, having pretty clear guidelines of what it looks like. And especially when you get into, the next, get into November, December, when you really have to start making decisions. So I think that's.
I'm stupid. I saw P and thought it was pitching with payroll. My bad. All right, here we go. This is the pitching one.
Process of, evaluation, ranking, looking at trade, free agency, outside the organization, and kind of weigh out what the, what the cost is to do business on that front. And then obviously internal, inside options. We had guys step up this year. I think, we'll be looking at, obviously some of the guys that were on the roster this year to step up. And also you look at guys like, the Matt Waldrons, Randy Vasquez, some guys at their first year of, from a big league standpoint that showed they can start in the big leagues. It's our job now to continue to develop those guys and have them take bigger steps here in year 2 and year 3 in certain cases. So, you talk about it all the time. We were always looking for pitching and starting pitching. Joe's a definite, it's a big loss, no doubt, to not have somebody like Joe all year long on the mound, or, what he brings to the clubhouse. So, we're going to look a lot of different places, but, that's what the next, 5 or 6 months are for, to go line up some good options and guys that we feel good about. We've done it over the last few years. Look at Waka, Lugo a couple of years ago, Nick Martinez at different points in time, and obviously this year bringing in a Michael King, bringing in a Dylan Cease. So we will we'll keep weighing out all our options, and hopefully we feel good. We'll bring in some guys that can try to fill that void.
They've done a really good job, Lugo and Waka. Very interesting, because they've done a really, really good job the last few years. Martin Perez this year at the trade deadline, finding veteran guys who maybe have been overlooked, or a lot of people think are past their prime, or just see them as relief pitchers in Lugo's case, and turning them into, man, that dude's a really, really good big league pitcher, or rekindling what they had because they get him with Ruben Niebla or over at the pitching lab at Point Loma Nazarene University, and then retool the mechanics, start using a different pitch a little more often. They've been fantastic at finding those types of guys. I'm really curious to see which guys are on their radar this year, because they're going to find 1 or 2 of them, and then probably at least one of them is going to hit in the same way to really become a legitimate starting pitcher again, working with this club. That's going to be really. Luis Severino is a guy I kind of look at going, what, man, maybe you can go and get that guy for a little bit less than most free agent markets are going to give him, and turn him into something, and he walks after a year, whatever, but he fills that void until Joe's back in 26.
Well, and going back to 23, they got Waka during spring training.
Yep.
Going back to this time last year, we were thinking Musgrove, Darvish, hopefully those guys get healthy, and then who? like question marks basically in 3 spots, if memory serves. Hopeful for some of the young guys and all that. And just off the top of my head, I mean, Darvish, obviously no Joe, but Cease, King, Waldron did some really good things. Vasquez did some really good things. You mentioned Martin Perez. Does Johnny Brito take the step.
Does Luis
7.
Patino come back and be the guy we thought he was in 2020 when he was one of the top prospects?
I would think at this point, Adrian Morjon is who he is, and he did pretty well in that role. So
He's a
maybe you
reliever.
don't,
Yeah,
you don't flirt with that. But
that's
you got like
done.
7 guys essentially for 5 spots. Pick up another maybe just to kind of give you a little bit more stability, a veteran or something like that. So you're not having to rely necessarily on Waldron or Vasquez or Brito for a full season, but not being in this position where they have been in recent years where they're like 3 guys for 5 spots up until like February is quite an improvement.
I like it. I like where they're going. And I kind of asked AJ about this too. Like, how much more stable are things now with this roster than they were a year ago? It's like, you just look at it going, man, you've got so many pieces where you're solidified. You know, it's really awesome. I think the other funny thing that he said today was when asked about the shortstops, you know, if you lose Ha-Seong Kim, does Xander Bogaerts stay there? Or, you know, I believe it was Dennis Lynn who said, you've got Toddy, AJ Cassavell, friend of the podcast, who said, you got, Toddy and Merrill, they've both done it. Would you consider tinkering with moving one of them back to shortstop? And AJ's like, I think they'd love it, man. They joke about it all the time. But they're also really good in the outfield, and we got plenty of shortstop options. So I think that was his polite way of saying, no, do not expect to see Merrill or Tatis Jr. sitting back at shortstop anytime soon.
No, I can't see it. And especially in a year where Xander Bogaerts did suffer a pretty serious injury playing in the infield, knowing Fernando Tatis Jr.'s history, and you're just having to make those types of plays more frequently than you are in right field. It's been such platinum glove first year. I don't know what the gold glove competition looks like this year, but you would think he's right there once again. And then Jackson Merrill.
Oh, no, the Padres do not have a gold glove finalist this year.
They do not have a gold glove finalist this year.
Unless I read that wrong. Hang on a second.
Did I miss that?
I looked at the list. Hey, let me go through it again just to double check. Because I was looking to see if Jackson Merrill was going to be on the list. He is not. He's been completely overlooked. And yet in the American League, Juan freaking Soto is once again a finalist for right field for Gold Glove, which just goes to show you nobody in Major League Baseball actually freaking pays attention to what's going on with defense.
I somehow completely missed that last week, and maybe it's because there aren't any Padres on the list. All that to say, Merrill and Tatis obviously play at a super high level. And
right field is Sal Frelick, Jake McCarthy, and Mike Yastrzemski.
I guess.
Which, yeah, sure. I don't.
I just, is it worth removing one of those guys, and all of a sudden you're like, well, who's our right fielder? You're just creating another issue. And when you've had a glut of infielders, then I think you can just kind of stand pat, keep things where they are, and not, continue that musical chairs. And and I think the injury thing is real, and a big part of that as well, that you have to kind of consider.
Oh yeah. By the way, Blake Perkins is one of those guys who was a finalist in center field. Jackson Merrill, more defensive runs saved, and a higher outs above average than Blake Perkins. And yet he's not a Gold Glove finalist.
And it's not like people weren't familiar with him, especially once he was in the Rookie of the Year competition with Paul Skeens. Like, everybody was talking about Jackson Merrill. So
they're talking about the bat. Nobody paid attention to the glove.
Yeah, very strange. Kyle also chiming in back to the pitching. I would have loved for them to get Walker Buehler for cheap and fix him, but he's had a great postseason, so his price is up now.
Or just stealing him from the Dodgers. That's always a good idea.
Yeah. Another thing that came up in talking about Merrill, and now we're going into another season where there's these, big ticket prospects that everybody's curious about, and maybe they're a year or 2 years away and trying to figure that out. AJ was asked about Merrill and what do you learn from that experience, and I thought his answer was interesting and smart, and certainly not surprising, but it is a case by case basis. You don't necessarily look at it as, well, we did have success kind of pushing this guy, from AA to the bigs, limited at bats, yada yada yada, no real time in the upper level of the minors. Just because it worked for him doesn't mean it's going to work for these other guys. And so I think the segment of the fan base that's all excited about what Merrill did and how that might apply to Ethan Salas and Leo DeVries, not necessarily, the same type of situation. And as far as we know, those guys, great character and all that. Jackson Merrill, like 80 out of 80 makeup, and so they gave them comfort level in challenging him in that way, and he obviously answered to it. And then there's the spring portion of it as well, is like, what do they do once you get him there? He's facing live bullets, he's in that environment, and he obviously thrived. And so it's a case by case basis, and we'll see with Salas and DeVries, but just because it worked for Merrill doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go that path with those other guys.
And Ethan Salas, obviously the guy who everyone's talking about. And have you seen his numbers in the Arizona Fall League?
Not officially. I've just seen that he's been playing well in the Arizona Fall League.
Yes, he's 10 runs batted in, 5 doubles, 954 OPS, 333 batting average in 8 games, and he's throwing runners out at a fairly consistent clip too. He's 18 years old.
I just think Jacob Marcy, though, last year spoiled the Arizona Fall League for me.
Jacob Marcy was never regarded. He was a dude they took out of Central Michigan in the middle round. Ethan Salas is a prodigy.
I'm not comparing the two. Obviously, the ceiling is it's a different stratosphere for Ethan Salas, but just in terms of getting excited about Arizona Fall League numbers, when people Kyle Glazer told us god awful pitching.
Oh yeah, well here's what I'm saying here is he had a terrible season at the plates at high A. Well, in the middle of the year, he came out to San Diego and worked with the major league hitting instructors, got a swing and his approach back on track, hit 284 the final month of the year in single A, and has now carried that on to even better swings in the Arizona Fall League. And I don't care how bad the pitching is. If you're 18 and you're doing this, you're doing something,
That's true.
You're definitely doing something. So he's got a year and a half still to be able to come up and be the first 19-year-old to start behind the plate in a Major League Baseball game since Ivan Rodriguez. So I think that's almost guaranteed to happen at some point. Now the kid is just that talented, but yeah, now that he is swinging the bat well and has been actually behind the plate very good the entirety of that time, and credit to him for not taking those bad at bats behind the plate with him. He still very much is invested in helping out his pitching staff, which is exactly what you want from a catcher. That's a huge green flag saying that the guy's makeup is there and he's going to be able to figure it out at the plate. He's going to be really good, but you also can't rush him because Jackson Merrill basically came to spring training and won that job. He wasn't given that job. So Ethan Salas is going to have to come to spring training and win that job. The only way that I'm going to look at it saying they're going to give him that job is if they let Higashioka walk and they let Diaz walk and they sign no other catchers. Then they're kind of suggesting like, okay, Ethan, we're hoping you come and take this job for us.
Well, the difference is Jackson Merrill, they needed Jackson Merrill to be the guy at center field, whereas they don't necessarily need Ethan Salas to be the guy at catcher because of the guys that you just rattled off. Now, it would be an incredible story, and fans, everybody, would be awesome to see. That's what made Jackson Merrill so great, is like, who was their option if Jackson Merrill didn't pop?
Yeah. It's they would have had. Also remember they weren't even sure Profar was going to be the everyday player last year. They signed him to a 1-year deal. Remember, he made 2.5 because he hit all of his performance incentives, but he was signed as like all right. He loves being around here. We love having him here. He's good for the clubhouse. He produces just enough of the bat. He's probably going to be a rotational guy. Nobody thought when he signed that contract, there's your starting left fielder every day. So they had
until the season, I think.
Yeah, they had Cal. I think they probably thought that Cal Mitchell might even have a better chance to win that starting center field job than Jackson Merrill when spring training started, and Merrill just played his butt off. Yeah.
Anything else before we wrap it up? We've hit on a bunch of topics. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we haven't touched on.
No, I think that's a lot. That's all the big stuff that AJ said today. I think if we're going to put a bow on it, the overarching thought here is we all know it was a very special team, and AJ knows it was a very special team. And I think he is motivated to try and do everything he can to capture this lightning in the bottle and keep it around as long as possible.
I think on that note, and that triggered something in my mind, that he said, learning from 21 and 23. And I'd love to ask him or get an honest answer from him, after they kind of do that exercise during this off season. Like, what did you glean from those experiences that you want to apply now to 25 to not revert and to kind of build on the momentum, which they obviously weren't able to do. So I thought that was an interesting statement from him, just kind of self-assessing and saying, okay, what do we need to do differently this time around so that we can make it to the postseason in back-to-back years?
Well, 21 was Jace Tingler in a full season, which obviously he was not the guy for the job. 23
pitching broke down in 2021 too. It was Vince Velasquez and Jake Arrieta by the end of the year.
Yeah. Then they didn't do anywhere near enough to, put any depth in the starting rotation. That, of course, was not the only reason that they were going 14 and 36 down the stretch or whatever it was. It was just an abysmal stretch because they all quit in the clubhouse. They all quit on the manager. 2023 was, you got mercenaries in there like Josh Hader and Blake Snell and Juan Soto, who were doing the things they wanted to do. And Bob Melvin he let the inmates run the asylum. He never put together a team dynamic. He let everybody do whatever the hell they wanted to do because they were all adults and big leaguers, and it didn't work. Now you got a guy like Mike Shildt, and a lot of really good dudes are all, I think, on the same page finally. So if it goes completely haywire in an odd year again, I don't know what to do. It's just
don't field a team in 2027.
Yeah, somebody's got a voodoo doll. I will not understand it. I won't get it. Or literally everyone gets hurt and they're gone. So I don't see how it can possibly happen this year because you don't have an unknown commodity for a full season and skipper, and you don't have a bunch of guys who you signed on who have innings limits who are ticking everybody off in the clubhouse.
Yeah. The trend needs to end. I don't know what it is, but it needs to end.
All right, I'm gonna put my name on it right now, Darnay. The Padres are gonna win at least 95 games and go to the playoffs again next year.
You heard it here first. I like that number. I can get behind that. That sounds like a really fun season. Sounds like an enjoyable season.
I'd do it. I'd love to be back in that clubhouse hugging Ruben Niebla and having shit dumped on my head. That'd be great.
95 and 25. You heard it here first. Thank you, Derek. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time.